Hey guys, how's it going? Thanks for joining me this afternoon. Got a great guest a great stream with a great guest. I think you'll really enjoy. Joining me today is Mark Granza. He is the founder and the editor of a great publication called I Am 1776. If you haven't been reading that, you really should fix it because they have all kinds of great people over there. And I'm not just saying that because he was one of the first people to publish my work. But Mark, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, Grant, it's great to be here, man. Thanks.
Absolutely. So we're going to get into all kinds of stuff. We're going to talk about anonymity. We're going to talk about Jordan Peterson and kind of his critique of it, and kind of as someone who publishes a bunch of anonymous people, kind of what you think about it, that kind of thing. But before we get into all of that, I want to know, how did this all get started? Kind of what's your backstory? How did you end up founding I Am 1776 and bringing so many interesting voices together?
It was kind of random, I would say. Wasn't definitely like planned. It wasn't like in the making for like years. I never really like pictured myself doing this sort of thing up until it was still like 2020. That's when we launched the magazine, and by then I spent like basically that previous like couple of years like going down a rabbit hole and basically becoming like very disillusioned with the conservative movement and not encountering any sort of like meaningful resistance to what I was increasingly perceiving as some as a threatening and very tyrannical form of like culture and by the left essentially, and I wasn't encountering anything in the mainstream that was like meaningfully opposing or like evenly accurately describing the nature of what was happening around us. So I got on Twitter and I started coming across a lot of like, for the purpose of the conversation as well, since we're going to talk about anonymity. A lot of these people are anonymous and or like dissident right. They tend to be even like post-liberal at the beginning. People that were just starting to criticize more accurately the essentially what the nature of the corruption that we were facing was about. And so by 2020, obviously the lockdowns began, and I was like already like very much on the fringes of the acceptable discourse, like bordering on the very unacceptable one. And then also like the riots in 2020, the summer of 2020, the Floyd riots, and I got more and more online, obviously because of the lockdowns. I became like basically a recluse, and I was just like online all the time. And I had this blog where I was completely neglecting because also like I'm not like this like super insightful writer or anything, but I built this website for some reason. I had this blog, and I thought to myself, if I'm like currently unable really to like coming up with anything really insightful myself or like potentially fruitful for the conversation, I was like, well, what am I going to do with this website? That's when I got the idea basically of like essentially giving it to other people. And so I literally just got an idea like that while talking with a friend on Facebook. And I said, I'm just going to launch a website. And basically I started reaching out to some of these people that basically this network of anonymous account, and so some were anonymous, some not. And I started spreading the voice. I was going to launch a website. And basically like 2 weeks later I started the website. But yeah, there was basically nothing really in my a background or my really upbringing that would ever suggest that I would find myself in this position. Quite the contrary, actually. I just happened, to see the opportunity, and I wanted to do it, and I find it meaningful to do it as well. So it's really rewarding in many ways as a work. So that's how I got started, basically.
Well, and I think that's so important because, so many people ask me, what can I do? How can I be involved? I'm not a writer. I'm not going to make video content, that kind of thing. They think that the only thing that you can do is commentate, but actually, there are things that are far more important. Guys like you that are bringing people together, providing a platform, organizing, you say, okay, me, myself, I'm not going to write a bunch of these big pieces, but you're facilitating something that otherwise wouldn't exist. That's the great thing, I think, about I Am 1776 is it has this ability to bring top tier big names like Michael Anton or people like that on board, but then you also have guys like Zero HP Lovecraft showing up on the same publication, and that's what gives it that's why it's always introducing something very interesting to the public and a face that I think otherwise wouldn't be available. And like you said, even though you don't have a background in something like that, facilitating that meeting space, creating that, is super important for what's going on right now.
Yeah, totally. Thanks, man. And also, I would say, like, I totally agree. And also, for me personally, it was like a moment where I essentially, I had the sufficient humility that I never really had in my life. I wasn't really like a humble guy. I was actually pretty arrogant, and I paid a high price for that actually in my early 20s. But essentially, I was going like down essentially a self discovery path. Like I had to really learn it the hard way that I wasn't going to be, it wasn't exactly, going to be neither an intellectual or like a public figure, in the sense that, the solution was going to come from me. And once I found the humility to understand that, that whatever I was going to do to improve the situation I was going to be at the forefront the way that I imagined I would have been. That's where basically opportunity, like the idea came up. I mean, so yeah, I mean, there are many ways, that we don't just need like people that they have the intellect to understand exactly what's going on, or maybe like the educational background, or the the skills as a writer, which doesn't mean that I cannot write, or I don't understand ideas. But if you tend to be one of those people, and if you tend to think that you can't contribute any other way by commenting yourself, it's not true. You can create networks, you can facilitate, as you put it, I guess outlets where people can find what you think is true, which is really what I was really my only I guess maybe, if not skill, or definitely my only um, constant, I would say, like the only thing that I was looking at the moment. Like I came to the point where like all of the certainties that I thought was of the way they understood society, and the way they understood the political landscape, and I would say the cultural landscape as well. They really like collapsed. It was more like in the making for years, but like 2020 and like I would say the period between 2017 and 2020, everything like that I thought was true, not just about me, but about society and everything, really like collapsed. And so I was really open-minded. The only thing I was looking for was truth. So if you're the kind of person who can, have the, I would say, some degree honesty of pursuing the truth and pursuing what you think is good, and there are many things that you can do. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's really essential, because I think so many of us have that backstory, right? Where we were looking at things and they didn't seem right, and over time they were wearing away. But then, like you, I hit that 2020 mark, and that's when my eyes really were opened. And then we're all sitting here trying to figure out, okay, well, what's next? Like, what can we do about it? What meaningful thing can we do to understand or take action, that kind of thing. And so many people, I think, are just kind of sitting around on the sidelines waiting for someone to kind of like pick them up off the bench and say, hey buddy, you're going to do this or whatever. But instead, you're taking action, right? And even if you don't know what that action is going to be, and even if it isn't maybe in the original avenue you want it to be, you can still make a difference by just getting in there. You never know what, I know so many people in this space now who are starting conferences and creating networks so people can find jobs if they get canceled, and just doing all kinds of work that's really essential for people to kind of survive in this space through what we're going through. And it's not all just making videos and writing essays or whatever. And so it's really great to hear that people like yourself are just picking up that ball and doing really important work. So let's go ahead and get to the actual topic here. So Jordan Peterson has a couple times gone after anonymity on the internet, and I think there's a lot of reasons why. I think maybe, understanding this guy as a public figure, he probably gets a lot of hate on a regular basis. uh, you can kind of understand why you would kind of get fed up with this thing, but he comes at people really harsh, right? He's not mincing his words. He's not just saying, hey, you should have the courage to post your name or stuff on this kind of thing. He really goes at people who calls them trolls and demons, all kinds of, stuff. Talks about how they have dark, triad personalities and they're psychopaths and that kind of thing. And I thought you were the right person to talk about this, because one of the things that makes your publication different and interesting is so many anonymous people are there. It's not everybody. In fact, I don't think it's even the majority of who you publish.
I looked it up before joining the stream. It's like 20 to 25, 20 to 30% of the author that we publish are published with a pseudonym.
Yeah, and so it's not the dominant thing of what you do, but it is a unique place that gives an outlet to some of the most interesting thinkers online right now who otherwise wouldn't be able to speak due to anonymity. So since you're someone who gives a platform, I was hoping you could kind of open up with just what is valuable about anonymity. How does it, or why does it create interesting thinkers in a time like ours?
Yeah, totally. I would say that actually I would start by, I think there's a pretty meaningful distinction to be made that I don't think is made quite often enough between anonymous and pseudonymous accounts. Like technically, I think like what Peterson is doing when he's going after the, I mean, letting aside the fact that I think is mostly like, as I pointed out before, I think he's mostly attacking anonymous account because it's essentially like attempting to keep promoting himself. Is essentially gatekeeping, as he was like you guys were talking about in the previous term that I listened to, and is gatekeeping and also attempting to promote himself as still like at the avant-garde of the like the countercultural and the most radical form of dissent possible when it really is like is mostly expressing views that have become pretty mainstream and pretty widely accepted. And so to some degree, I think his attack is motivated by this desire to essentially gatekeep and promote himself and not being willing to recognize that if he really wants to be still, at the avant-garde of the most meaningful form of dissent, he would have to really start changing some of his opinions and maybe like bringing them making it a little bit more radical that is not more than he's willing to do. But I think like when it comes to like anonymous account, really, I was looking up this lecture today about like essentially like breaking down the meaning of what is a name really, and it was talking about anonymous and pseudonymous account. Like really, what most of like these people that we defend when we talk about the Anon movement, like the Anon right, they tend to be pseudonymous. As opposed to anonymous, because the technical definition of anonymous is somebody that does not have a name. So let's say that you put something out there and you just like don't put any name, we just like put like a random name, and that is not associated with anything that you ever published before, and is never going to be associated with anything that you're going to publish. It's completely different from someone that has built some kind of identity around like a pseudonym. And this is it might sound like just like semantic, but it's actually a meaningful distinction, because essentially the main critique that someone like Peterson has, I understand, is that there's no accountability whatsoever for what you say, and that's not really true for like pseudonymous account, because like there might not be accountability from like a legal perspective, because they can't. There's obviously like a layer of safety when it comes to like potential repercussion from the state or even like getting canceled, the way do I understand, but getting canceled, like fired or having some kind of like financial repercussion, but it still doesn't mean that there's no any form of repercussion. Like you still, like if you say something that is outright down, but if it's stupid or incorrect or immoral or just like cringe or whatever, and you get criticized for it, and you're essentially to the point that, let's say, you have to delete your own account, I mean, that's still a form of repercussion, because like you can't just like, unless you're like an outright like a textbook sociopath, you can just like create a new identity and just start starting over. But people are supposedly you're going to be interacting with the same people, right? You're gonna want to interact with the same account, the same sphere that you were belonging to, and so I think it's a meaningful distinction, because the main critique that these people have, this essentially Peterson have, is that there's no accountability and there's no essentially incentive for people to behave in a way that is productive for the discussion and is still like socially decent, and not like being like an outright troll or a psychopath, or like I don't know what he calls them, like demons. He says
literal demons. He said, yeah.
No, even like sociopath, like demons. So yeah, I think like that's most of the offer that we publish, they tend to be like pseudonymous account, if not all of them. Actually, I don't really think we have really like published like an outright anonymous account, like someone that just like, I guess it's like a whistleblower or someone like someone like that could be like an anonymous account. It just like puts the information out there. We haven't really published any anonymous account. Most of these accounts, they obviously have this layer of security that you can't really trace them to like a real life, and by that would mean like a legal name or like a in real life person. But they still have some kind of like, if people want to double check, if people want to check what they said before, what they wrote before, and get some kind of like idea of these people are, there is some kind of like available personality online that you can hold them accountable to some degree. So yeah, that would be like my starting point for this particular debate. As to the value of like dissident, like anonymous, I guess if we say it's anonymous account, is like, I mean, it's pretty obvious. I mean, the main argument in favor of anonymity is basically that, you know, these people tend to be less constrained and less worried about what people might think of them, because they're not necessarily concerned about gaining like mainstream respectability, or because like they're not accountable to the same degree. So they tend to be more truthful. They tend to express their opinion more clearly. They tend to express the real opinion, I guess you can say, to the degree that they feel real to them, than like a person writing on his own name would. And yeah, I mean, I've got that experience with like, we published a few articles, like a few that comes to mind, for instance, like Schwab. This is a account that goes by Schwab that published like an article on MK Ultra. That's not the kind of article that you would easily get out of someone who published on his real name. Maybe now, yes, because like it seems like even MK Ultra is being kind of like mainstream. Tucker Carlson was talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say even like someone like Corporate Medicine, this article was a critique of essentially the cathedral, but like focus on the medical industry and the healthcare industry by this actually practicing physician, right? And essentially, if she would have published, she used to go by Paracelsus. If she would have published under her real name, I mean, she would get instantly fired. And so there's obviously like a value and a good reason for people to publish anonymously, and obviously a value for people in our position to find that kind of content that otherwise wouldn't be easy to find, but I going and asking people that write under their own name. So I would say those are the obvious arguments in favor.
Yeah, no, I think that distinction between anonymous and pseudonymous is really important, because that's a really good point, that the idea of these people not being able to be held accountable is only true in the sense that you can't publicly destroy them, right? If they're people who want to build a reputation, who want to have credibility, you have to consistently present something that matters, right? You can't just go out there and say anything. You can't just go out there and throw bombs all the time, because if you do, no one's going to take you seriously. And most of the guys that are writing, say for I Am 1776 in that way, are people who have already built up a certain level of public trust. That's why they've been asked to write in the first place. So it's not real. It's not true anonymity in the sense of, oh, there's just no one will ever know who posted this. There'll be no chain of thought or context to what happened here. Someone can easily destroy their reputation. And I've seen many people easily destroy their reputation as Anons. That happens all the time. People flame out and destroy themselves and become laughing stocks as anonymous posters. The only difference is they don't lose their job at the end of it, right? Like, and exactly. So yeah, and so that's really important when we
unless they get boxed, and then they actually do lose their job.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, is we know exactly why people do this, like you said, because we do live under soft totalitarianism. Yeah, no one's carting you off to the gulag yet, but you will get completely canceled. You could get fired. Your family could be destroyed. People might keep you from doing banking now, right? This is something we see, like people unable to buy or sell things, because they have the wrong opinions publicly, right? And so I think when a guy like Peterson looks at this, I think the reason he approaches it the way he does is his own personal experience, right? Because Peterson did go through a kind of cancellation, right? He was very publicly attacked for what he said. He was called awful names. People protested him. People, slandered him. All kinds of stuff happened to him. And he thinks to himself, probably, hey, I did this under my real name. I stood up and was counted. I did what I should do, and everything was fine. But I think the big difference for Peterson and like your average person is Peterson was already of a really high social standing, right? He's already a
Exactly.
guy who had a lot of prestige, taught a lot at big universities, and so when he was canceled, what he did was immediately turn that into a bunch of fame, a giant speaking tour, big book deals. He turned into a, multimillionaire, I'm sure, at this point, off of this cancellation. And I'm not taking anything away from his bravery or from his body of work in those
I
times.
actually want to take something away from his bravery,
Okay,
but
go ahead. Go ahead.
because I actually I have this. I mean, I obviously can only speculate to his real reason for doing this. And with this, I don't mean to say that it wasn't brave at all, but I actually remember coming across Peterson before. I wasn't exactly following, but I remember coming across him before even the whole like gender pronoun bill came up and he became vocal against it. He was actually already quite popular online. Like he was posting all of his lecture online. He already built a following. He had a Patreon account, so I had a pretty dedicated following. He had some kind of like safety net, and obviously like Peterson is not exactly like obviously it's not a stupid man, and he must understand the dynamics of like cultural and political discourse to some extent, and he definitely probably didn't predict it that he was going to explode this big. Because I mean, like look at him now. He's basically probably the is he like the most famous guy in like cultural political discourse ever. I mean, I saw him like posting a picture with like Cristiano Ronaldo, which is like the most famous man on the planet basically. And he was but he had some kind of like safety net, and and I think like while it was still to some degree obviously brave, because you're still like putting your opinion out there, and you're opposing like the main cultural force of society, and actually speaking truth to power to some degree, although it doesn't really like get that close to the truth as we might want him to be. But it was still brave. But I think it actually was it was I think it was partly more like a calculated risk. I think he knew that there was a pretty good chance that the whatever he did was going to increase his popularity, and potentially even like elevating to the status of like an intellectual, or more like a countercultural figure. I'm not, again, I don't mean to obviously say that it wasn't brave at all. It was the opposite of bravery, like cowardice, or was like complete grifting, or like or anything. But I think like you may ask most people today, and the most people, the way they perceive Peterson before he became famous, it was like most people feel like this unknown professors, he just like out of nowhere, he just decided to just speak the truth. And this I think is like this is I think also like this part of like a related problem. Now most of people argue against anonymity, or like pseudonymous account. They tend to actually make the argument that essentially what they're doing, and most of these people are obviously people that are already like engaged, like, because normally people don't bother like participating in like anonymous versus real time debate. And most of these people are cultural, political commentator, journalists, maybe essayists, or like people that are engaged like in the content economy to some degree, that we are also in. And they sort of like make the argument essentially what they're doing is speaking the truth to power, to the same degree that, let's say, some like normie or like very like oppressed lonely guy in some it's like that guy from the Arab Spring, right? That basically set himself on fire. They sort of like conflate what they're doing with like some just guy who just want to speak the truth and potentially risk his whole career and life, even to essentially criticize the regime. I mean, there's not entirely what we're doing. I mean, I basically use my real name, and I'm not just like attempting to speak the truth. To some degree, is like we're gaining, and we're like profiting, not necessarily financially, but like we're getting rewarded for our opposition to some degree, because like you get elevated to your status in the, I guess, commentary industry, or the like publishing industry gets elevated the more truthful you are and the more courageous you are. So there's like a return on the risk that you take. There's actually a pretty good return, and so and I think like Peterson was, I think Peterson was pretty much aware that he knew, or pretty much easily could predict that this was not going to be like the end of his career. So it wasn't like entirely like 100% prey. There was also, in my opinion, some form of like calculated risk that he took. And probably even like for his own sake, like probably he was just like sick of being in academia. That's commendable, right? Because like academia is a sick place. And so he probably thought that it was actually a pretty good opportunity to, get some fresh air, to so to speak, and explore new form of venture and for himself. So yeah, I think this is the crux of the whole like anonymous versus like real life debate things. Like we're all engaged to some degree in this like content economy making, and essentially the only real difference is that anonymous accounts tend to be more free to express opinions, like dissenting opinions and transgressive opinions that would otherwise get them in trouble if it were published under their real name. And the downside of that is obviously that there is some truth to the fact that this is sort of like encourages or like incentivizes or at least facilitates some kind of like form of like antisocial or maybe just like childish behavior or not careful enough behavior. And on the other side of the debate is obviously the opposite way. I mean, obviously they're more publishing under your name makes you more cautious and makes you more I guess responsible, or at least incentivizes you to be more responsible. But the obvious downside of that is that you always have to be policing yourself, not always, right? I like to think that I don't police myself in any way, but that's not entirely true, right? But I also don't do it. I police myself also because like as a form of like tactic, because maybe I just don't think that saying out loud this thing right now would have any benefit, and would probably put maybe the people that write for us under attack for guilt by association and whatnot. But this I think are the upside and the downsides of both writing under your real name and pseudonymously, basically.
Yeah, I think that's true. You're right that, Peterson probably understood that, he wasn't just bumbling into this thing and happened to have arrived at this moment. I think there's probably some truth to that. But I think that like you said, we're all limiting ourselves to some extent, right? Like we're always checking what we should say. Then that's a healthy thing, right? Like that it's healthy to know the limitations around you. Like you're not a complete, sociopath. Like you notice the people around you, you care about what they're going to think about you, you care about what they're going to say, you care about the ramifications of what you speak. But the thing is that doesn't just disappear if you're doing it anonymously, or pseudonymously. Like you said, those pseudonymous accounts still, because first they have to work a lot harder sometimes because they have no connection to real life. They can't like put a pretty picture up on their account, so they have to kind of earn every bit of their reputation, because they don't have a fancy title or a background or a family name or good looks or something to propel them. They have to get there solely based on their ability to kind of post or write, right? And so there's that aspect of it. But that means they also have to like be careful about what they say as well, because like their audience has expectations. Just because your interactions are online doesn't mean that they're without consequence, even if your real name isn't out there, right? Like the people who are reading your stuff, who are listening, who are understanding, if you want to gain their attention and have respectability and credibility and something to say, you have to use discretion in what you say and how you communicate. And this is especially true in a place like Twitter, which to this day is still like literally just banned Steve Saylor yesterday, right?
Yeah,
Like, so it's not like even under Elon, you can just say whatever. And Steve Saylor wasn't saying anything he hasn't been saying for ever on that site, and all of a sudden he posts something and he's banned out of nowhere. So it's not like anonymous accounts don't have to be careful with what they say or how they phrase things. I mean, there are just straight up flame accounts, right? Like you can just go in and post all kinds of crazy stuff or scream at a celebrity or something, and then just jihad your account and boom, it's gone, right? Like that's a thing you can do. But that's a short-term strategy, right? Like you'll never do anything of significance doing that. So if that's the only thing he's referring to, well, that's one thing, but I don't think that's all he's referring to, right?
Yeah,
Like
I think he's obviously conflating, is obviously generalizing. That's his first mistake.
mhm.
Because there are actually anonymous accounts that behave like that. I mean, I think actually what is, if I remember correctly, what basically triggered at least this last attack, which is done before against anonymity. I had it here in front of me. Like he said before, like I'm increasingly convinced that Twitter anonymity is the refuge of scoundrel and feint. Say it and stand behind it, or hold your tongue. This was like already like last year, like more than a year ago. But I think like what basically prompted this last attack, it was, if I remember correctly, it was in response to an interview with Netanyahu. I think it was actually shortly after the whole Kanye, Nathan chocolate milk thing, and I probably got a lot of like trolling accounts that were commenting on YouTube, if I remember correctly. And I think essentially what it did is basically generalize based on those comments to everyone that is basically using a pseudonymous name or having an anonymous account. I think that's his first mistake. But this is not in defense necessarily of it, because as I said again, I don't think he genuinely believes that you can generalize. I mean, he's a psychologist; he must know this. I mean, and he's purposely attacking and generalizing and he's using the name anonymous accounts, anonymous trolls, and essentially even asking Elon Musk, if I remember correctly. I couldn't find that tweet before, but if I remember correctly, it was asking Musk maybe either to ban them or maybe to like ghost ban them or something like that, or maybe force them to reveal their identity, or if not, they would just like being hidden from the timeline or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was demanding Musk to do, but I think the real motivation to do that boils down to the fact that he's essentially trying to gatekeep. I think it's essentially sensing some kind of vibe shift that we're not in 2017 anymore. That essentially expressing opposition to gender pronouns is not really the highest or like most dangerous or more effective form of dissent. I mean, we kind of like moved past beyond. Most reasonable people and most mainstream people actually kind of agree. I mean, you see people like Barry Weiss and Bill Maher even like occasionally criticizing the woke. So I mean, we're pretty much beyond that.
J.K. Rowling is against us at this point, right? Like that's how mainstream opposition to this is.
Yeah, Elon Musk. I mean, Elon Musk literally just bought Twitter and he hates the woke.
Right.
And I think like also, yeah. So I think that's really the real reason why he's generalizing. I don't really think he's completely unaware of the difference between a troll that just like create like some random guy that just wants to like troll or like show his worst impulses, or just like say things without any sort of like accountability, and anonymous accounts that, I mean, he must have come across some kind of like anonymous account. He's not in our sphere, but he must be aware there are some like quite popular accounts that have been creating content, that have been writing anonymously, pseudonymously, that have been like building an audience. Like he must be aware of that. So I think it's even more dishonest than his looks, his attack on anonymity, precisely because I think he's trying to gatekeep rather than actually identifying some kind of like phenomenon or not.
Yeah, and it's particularly gross for a guy who lives in a country that just stole the bank accounts of protesters, not just them, but their families and people who were trying to support them, and actually sent like, agents of the state to go beat them. Like he's talking about how you need to stand behind your word and you need to have the courage of your conviction. But when these guys were doing exactly the things that he suggested in real life under their real names, he basically told the truckers go home, and he didn't have any support. He hasn't been out there raising funds or fighting for these people's rights or any of this stuff. He's willing to complain about anonymity, but he's not willing to do anything that might alleviate the cancel culture and the genuinely totalitarian state oppression aimed at people in his country who follow his advice. And I'm sorry, that's cowardly at that point. Like that's just ugly. Like it's one thing to say, okay, I disagree with this, and so I'm going to do everything I can to support you and make sure that you have the right to speak up and do, what you need to under your own name. It's another thing to, just throw shade at people and then cowardly, tell them to retreat in the face of following your advice once the consequences come due.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, totally. I mean, he has done it before. He's done it with I think with the vaccines. It was, I think, pretty pro vaccines. I guess it makes sense because, like, he's, at the end of the day, he's a liberal and he believes in, like, the Enlightenment, the values of the Enlightenment and science and all of that. But he has done it before. I mean, it's quite telling. After he posted that tweet, like, I went through his timeline, which I never do. After he posted that, the tweet that, essentially anonymous trolls are basically like demons, and they're like psychopaths, and they're and all of that. It's like, well, okay, then what is, like, the most meaningful form of dissent? And I went through his timeline. Like, the next tweet was, like, in reply to the Babylon Bee, essentially posting just another article about criticizing gender, prominent people. And he was, like, replying, like, well done, guys, keep up the good work, with a smiley face. It's like, is this what we're supposed to do? So is this it? This is it? This is how our dissent should look like, essentially, making jokes to, like, blue-haired gender people with pronouns in their bio. Is that it, right? So I think there's definitely some cowardice on his part. I don't mean to call him, like, a coward, like, because he has done, I'm willing to recognize he has done some like, and said some, like, very interesting, positive things. I was myself actually one of the first people that came across him, and I actually enjoyed his lecture a lot. And then he started, like, commenting on politics, and he became pretty cringe pretty fast. But it's I don't know how much is tied to this the fact that he's actually publishing, that he's actually using his real name, and sort of, like, he's pretending to be expressing his own opinion, as opposed to, like, policing himself or whatnot. I don't know exactly what factor the fact that he's like, a public figure under his own name with a face out there plays a role in this, but he's definitely not willing to take his ideas to this natural conclusion, and being as intellectually honest as he can be for obvious status purposes, right? He's obviously concerned about mainstream respectability. He obviously wants to keep appealing to the masses. He wants to be invited to all these events, and just like most social climbers, political commentators really do. And so there's definitely some cowardice on his end.
So I think one of the things that you mentioned while you were talking about Anons is interesting too to explore, because you mentioned having experts who otherwise couldn't speak write very essential pieces pseudonymously. And I think that's really important because in our culture where the experts are the high priests, right? Well, if the experts say, the experts didn't say, the experts believe this. And, in this culture where the expertise is supposed to grant some kind of blessing from above on your words, there's a lot of pressure inside lots of these disciplines to tell people to shut up, sit down, and just parrot whatever woke stuff is coming down the pipeline. Who cares what the data says? Suppress the data if you need to, rewrite it. We have social scientists who have to completely, like, trash studies and papers that they've submitted and completely, like, rewrite the whole thing, putting emphasis elsewhere and changing the data just so the reports don't say the things they don't want them to say, right? And so when you have this kind of incredible internal pressure on experts to conform and come up with exactly the narrative that they're supposed to, the anonymity or the pseudonymity is really important, because they can still deliver they can deliver the data and they can deliver the knowledge in a way that makes it clear that they are someone who is familiar with and has expertise in there, but without having to pull their credential and put them that completely on the line, because once they're out of it, it's not like you can go practice somewhere else. You've been outed as a wrong thinker, and you're going to end up like, Steve Saylor somewhere. So, like, the importance of experts to be able to kind of leave that groupthink and actually exercise their expertise in a way that's valid and meaningful and reveals truth, I think is also a really essential part of anonymity in our time.
Yeah, and I think it also allows them to maintain some kind of like insider knowledge that would
Hmm.
otherwise be lost the moment that they publish something, because like they wouldn't be able to um, provide it anymore. I mean, the obvious example again is like the one that comes to mind actually is that the article that we published on like corporate medicine and the way that essentially the healthcare industry functions. I mean, um, you publish something like that, and under your own name, essentially your career is over, and whatever else you want to publish, you essentially have to rely on what you have witnessed in the past. And but if you're careful enough, and I know, I've met enough anonymous accounts so far, and I've interacted, and I got to know, I've been met in person a few of them. I obviously won't make any name, but I know some of these people actually have like important position. That's another thing that is widely, like, pretty much misunderstood by the normie, like, or even like someone like Peterson, that they tend to assume or portray these accounts as sort of like, they're all, some irresponsible, early 20-year-old or teenage like guy lives in his mother's basement and just like, been online all day. It's not true. Like most of the accounts that I've actually got to know, and it might be because like most of the accounts that I got to know as people that we want to publish, and people that want to publish tend to be pretty decently established commentators, and so people that actually, publish insightful things. So it's quite obvious that these people are not just like some random or like, some young inexperienced or guy just like, ranting online. But um yeah, I mean, like that's also like another, like, a lot of these people, they really have pretty respectable either academic or even like government position, or like very high up in the tech industry, for instance. There are people that they have some kind of knowledge, or maybe they have like experience in like in the military or whatnot, and so they can give some kind of like insider knowledge if they aim to criticize the very structure that they basically are involved in, and keep doing in the future, while maintaining that position. So it's actually, it provides us, a way to gain insider knowledge that otherwise what might not be available anymore if they publish on their own name. Obviously, this is like a very uh, it's more like a minor benefit. It's not like you can really build the whole argument in favor of anonymity based on this, but it's still like something, that is like, it can be quite valuable to the discussion and the whole, culture war thing.
Yeah, it's kind of a whistleblower status, right? Like it's someone
Right.
that gets to maintain that access that otherwise wouldn't allow you to peer into those spaces. If you just have everyone who is a wrong thinker immediately declare, their thought crime, they all stand up, they all get filed out of the room, and then these people get to continue doing what they're doing with literally zero chance that anyone possibly could reveal them or could understand what's going on, could explain it to the masses, that kind of thing. So I think that is very important. And I think at the same time, while you do have some of these guys who are very high profile and are in really important essential positions and are sharing that kind of information, I think it's also really important because a lot, I talk to, Peterson's not alone. I've talked to many people at this point in mainstream conservative kind of, the higher tiers of commentary and that kind of thing. And a lot of people have expressed the sentiment to me like, well, we just need everybody to kind of go out there and speak the truth, and if just everyone would go out there and say the truth in the real life and everyone would just stand up, then things would get fixed. But the thing, and maybe it's because they're kind of separated from the day-to-day life, maybe it's because they don't, it's been a long time since maybe they have been in a position where their family might not eat if they get found out, if they may not be able to pay the mortgage, that kind of thing. They don't realize what it's like out there. You can't ask each person to like charge a machine gun nest alone, right? Like you might be able to get guys to charge a machine gun nest if you can guarantee that most of them are going to survive it and they're going to do something important. But you can't just get people one by one to run in and get mowed down and expect anything to change, right? If you don't have a network, if you don't have a plan, if you don't have a way that the people standing up and being counted and saying something like that matters, you can't actually advance the ball, you can't protect people who take the hit, then people aren't going to do it, right? And you can talk about the need for courage all you want, but if you have no plan for victory, you're just asking people to martyr themselves for nothing. And I think that's a really important aspect of this thing that a lot of people don't get into. If you want people to be able to speak the truth in person, then you've got to do the groundwork to make it count. You've got to make a difference. And if you can't do that, you shouldn't be going after people who are just trying to express the truth in a way that still allows them to go home to their family at night and make sure that everybody eats and everybody's got, a house, a roof over their head.
Yeah, totally. But I think like this like boils down against to what we were talking about earlier. I think like you say, like, and I don't mean necessarily like to criticize and to generalize this sort of like criticism towards anyone in the like somewhat mainstream conservative right-wing movement, because actually there are plenty of people that I respect, and I think they are doing like truly courageous, or like they tend to be very truthful and genuine in what they do. But I mean, again, like this argument that you just said that you've heard people making, again, it's like it fails under scrutiny, really, because like again, it boils down to what exactly are the real consequences for you to say that. So if someone like I actually can use myself as an example, which I put my face out there, I publish it under my real name. Like if I say something that is controversial that might attract some like negative attention by the mainstream, but and I generally try to speak truth to power, there is a risk. But because I'm involved in like the commentary and the publishing industry and the political debate, to some degree, I'm not a public figure, but to some degree I'm involved with that. There's actually also like a reward. And so you can't just like say that that's basically what everyone can do, because most people are not involved. And so like you can say like, before everyone just do that, the baker on the street, then the normie type, the soccer mom, and the soccer mom tend to be liberal, but like like random normie people, they don't really have that kind of like reward structure that we have. Like we get potentially, hopefully, defended by other people, and therefore our sort of like credibility increases among our sphere, and then we get invited to talk to podcasts, and then we get more attention to our work. And I mean, take someone like Andy No, right? The anti-Antifa journalist. I mean, that the best thing that ever happened to his career was getting, basically attempted to get canceled, and basically, is still kind of brave what he did, because they almost tried to kill him.
He got physically assaulted multiple times. Yeah.
But that was, to some degree, is the best thing that ever happened. So that while there is truly a risk, and so it takes some kind of like bravery to say, to speak truth to power, or like oppose the current regime, there's also like a reward that there is there for those of us that are involved in the industry, but it's not there necessarily for someone that either doesn't have a following already, and therefore it can just like been identified as somebody by some co-worker or somebody that knows him, that knows who he is in real life, or just like some normie type that essentially is not really doesn't really have any connection to public figures, or like people willing to defend himself, or probably wouldn't even notice that he's getting persecuted for what he said. So yeah, I mean, like this is partly what people this is part of the problem with the argument against with this idea that you can just like essentially tell the truth and come out against the tyranny of our time, the soft tyranny that we're going through, that people like the conservative movement and the conservative figures make when they speak about using your name. This is they tend to assume that is available to everyone, and that pretty much everyone would be able to become who they are, and some kind of like protective figure, at least by in our own circles or whatnot. But in reality, it's not available to most people.
Yeah. Not everyone can spin cancellation into a book tour and celebrity and raising their profile and becoming, it's one of those things where, I was a JPEG for a long time on the internet because, I had a normal job that had nothing to do with media. And if, I was, in a situation where that came out, I would have, very likely been fired for, what I was doing. I got very lucky that, kind of the skill set I had allowed me to turn that into something, like you're talking about now. But the average person at my job would have just been completely devastated, right? There just would have been none of this ability to like turn that into a book or a podcast or something like that. And so you've got to have a plan. You got to understand people like that. You can't just assume that like everyone, like you said, everyone's just going to launch a career off of being canceled. That's not how it works. But I think we've touched a lot on the whole synonymous thing and anonymity. I wanted to ask you one more thing before we kind of wrap things up, guys. If you have any questions for myself or Mark, you can go ahead and drop those in the chat here. I see Santa Claus is visiting us. Big man, I really appreciate you coming by. I know you got a lot of work to do here. Thanks for showing up at chat. He's always a great supporter of the channel. But Mark, before we go, you're the first physical issue, because it's been mostly an online publication. But the first physical issue that you guys did was about the need for art and kind of creativity, right? And you guys did that in a way that, oh yeah, got it in front of you. There you go. Yeah, good salesman knows what he's doing here. But
so it's there. Someone else.
Well, but the nice thing is you really took the time, and it's very important. You didn't just gather essays on beauty and art. You put it together in a way that's very aesthetically compelling, right? It's one of those things where you could pick up an issue of a very high quality, fashion magazine and look for those kind of photo spreads. And it's the same kind of thing happening, but with essays on like why it's important for the cultural right to produce this kind of thing. Can you talk a little bit on the importance of kind of beauty and art, and why it's not just the ideas on the paper that matter, but why those things are compelling and kind of move things forward for people in our areas?
Totally, yes. There's actually like this, I guess, I don't know how popular saying, but like I heard it said before, like if you come across like an ugly website, it's probably conservative.
Yeah, Yarvin said that you can judge how conservative the website is about how terrible the graphic design is. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So it's like I noticed this when I began to like starting to think about launching a publication. Like I knew that I wanted to take care of the aesthetics aspect. I mean, it's part of, I guess, my inclination, I guess, always to I like aesthetically pleasing things, and so I was inclined to want to do that anyway. But I also noticed that most of the websites that I was following, I mean, there was great content in it. Although, as I said, like they weren't like taking it as far as I wanted to, but still, like there was pretty good content, but it wasn't like necessarily supported by a look and feel or aesthetic, however you want to call it, that so like projected that kind of respectability, or I guess credibility, that like a good looking website might give you. So that's why I knew that I was going to try it, at least to the best of my ability. You might not like the way that I take care of the aesthetics of the project in general, but whether it's like the print edition of the website. But you can tell that I definitely take a lot of care and put a lot of thought into that aspect. And I mean, the importance, I mean, it's pretty obvious. I mean, like you said, if you speak about beauty, and if you speak about the importance of beauty, but then you neglect the way that you present your idea about beauty, whether it's like online or like in print, it's like, don't you lose some kind of like credibility when it comes to like making an argument for beauty? So there has to be combined in terms of like how to persuade a larger public to care about beauty, and to even like increase your own credibility, because like people, you go on like a liberal outlet, and they tend to be quite nicely curated from an aesthetic perspective, and almost like instinctively gives you that extra credibility that you instantly gain by coming across this website, whether as opposed to, whereas like if you come across some like very purely curated website from an aesthetic perspective, you immediately like, what is this? Is this like some random dude's blog, or is this like just some like a student's thing going on? Like it's like psychologically works also on a credibility level, I guess you say. But yeah, I mean, like when we decided to do the art and literature issue, like I said this before, it was actually an interview that we conducted with Mike Anton, more than a year ago now, and then we sort of like somewhat randomly started talking about the importance of creating art and creating also like combining your political your efforts into um, affecting policies as much as your effect on your efforts in creating culture that can affect opinions. And we started talking about that, and you mentioned like the problem of like patronage networks, and I was kind of like fascinated by the attention that that little segment in an otherwise like very long and very great interview, because like Mike Anton is just like um, impressive, really, like the way how fast he can think on his feet and all that. So it was a great interview, but that little segment got a lot of attention, and that's when I knew that was going to be something that we needed to explore even more. And there was clearly like a I guess like unexpressed consensus among most of the people in a sphere that was some kind of problem with the art creation and culture productivity of the right in general. Again, like this obviously like the giant elephant in the room when you talk about this, like you can't help but stress obviously or I guess to clarify, we're not really talking about politicizing art and making like art that is political, but we are talking about creating art that can move people and that can actually be truth to human nature and you know touch people at their deepest level. And we tend, I tend to make the argument that usually that kind of art tends to be art that's on our side, because obviously we tend to think of ourselves of people that are on the side of the truth and the side of human nature and the side of God and all of that. So that's basically when we started thinking about the print edition. And so yeah, as you said, I wanted to combine something that's aesthetically pleasing, and not just like some argument in favor of it, just presented in like the cheapest way possibly that I can find to print, with some random images that you find on like free images stock website thing, or like the first image when you Google like a keyword on Google or something. I knew that I was going to be pretty selective. It's just like the same way that has been pretty selective on the website. And so yeah, I like to think that it got pretty good reception, and a lot of people like complimented on this. So I guess we kind of succeeded to some degree.
Yeah, I think it might sound obvious for some people, but for those of us who are particularly naturally affected by efficiency brain, like the need for beauty isn't, it's often pushed, it's often knocked down in our society, like, it's especially it doesn't matter what it matters, just the function. You don't have to worry about the form, you don't have to worry about the aesthetics of the thing. You don't, you don't have to have the beauty because the thing works. And that, it might seem obvious that beauty is important, but it is something that I kind of came to a realization to in a more true way. Like, of course, like any person, I preferred beautiful things, but thinking about beauty is something that is a good unto itself and matters, and can make a stronger argument than a well-crafted essay or speech or something, is not something that I think I had given sufficient enough weight until the last few years. So even though it might feel obvious, I think that there are still lots of people who need to hear that like beauty is its own argument. And that pairing that and like you said, not politicizing that beauty, but letting that beauty speak truth into things that will then manifest themselves in the world around you, in culture, and then eventually in political movements, I think is really essential.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree, and that's basically the reason why why I try that. That's more like my end of things when it comes to like the project. I've written before, interviewed people, etc. But I do my main contribution is literally taking care of like the aesthetics aspect as well. Obviously, like coordinating, commissioning, all of that. But my input in terms of like creating content is more like designing the print edition and taking care of the aesthetic. And I do it for that reason. Like you said yourself, like beauty is an argument in of itself. Like it doesn't really need, and people like instinctively can tell what is beautiful and what is not.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have all these like modernist architecture guys, or like they try and make all these like crazy arguments in favor of like brutalist architecture as a form of beauty or whatnot. Then why is it that people would like normie types, when it comes to like, I live in Budapest currently, but I come from Italy. They when they come to Italy, they don't photograph brutalist architecture. Like none of them. They always go after like beauty. They all go also like traditional beauty or like actual like physical beauty. People are just like naturally attracted to that, no matter how much time, how much you try to re-engineer that. People are instinctively and naturally attracted to things that are universally beautiful, and I think that our job as conservative right wingers, how you want to define yourself, if you're on the side of beauty and you're right, and if you're on the side of the truth, you cannot neglect the aesthetic and beauty aspect of like your content production. It has to be central, in my opinion, as much as you put it, as much as it is the quality of the actual things that you're saying, and those two things have to be combined, in my opinion.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up here. Guys, thanks for coming by. Really appreciate the audience here. And actually, we've got Santa here. Like I said, and we really appreciate your contribution, sir. Merry Christmas to everybody. This will be the last show before Christmas. So just want to wish everybody Merry Christmas. Really appreciate you guys, sticking with the show, watching, listening, supporting, all that stuff throughout the year. Mark, for people who want to find, obviously, I am 1776, but like, is there anything exciting coming out? Anything you want to tell people about, promote anything coming up that they should go check out?
Well, actually, there is I guess the second issue. I sent you a copy. You haven't received it yet.
I haven't gotten it yet. Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to seeing it. Yeah, I haven't
Yeah.
gotten to see it yet.
We just released essentially our second issue in Florida. If people want to buy that, they can do that and support our project. And I guess really that's it. I mean, we got some really good articles lined up as usual, so they're gonna be coming out soon. We'll take a little break of the holidays period. So yeah, that's it really. They can find our work on im7076.com, and same on Twitter, im//7076.
Excellent. All right, guys. Well, thanks again for watching, and really appreciate Mark coming on. As always, Merry Christmas, and we'll talk to you next time.